Welcome to God Friday Discussions. As we embark on this journey together, it's important to acknowledge the diversity of thoughts, beliefs, and experiences that each of us brings to the table. Our discussions are rooted in a spirit of exploration, learning, and mutual respect. The views expressed are those of the individual participants and are presented for the purpose of open dialogue and personal reflection. Please note, we recognize and honor the freedom of personal belief. This platform does not advocate for any singular viewpoint as the absolute authority on spiritual matters. Our discussions are intended as a safe space for sharing and growth. We encourage you to approach each session with an open heart and mind, but also respect your personal boundaries. If at any point you find the content not to your liking or comfort, you are free to disengage as you see fit. While we seek to provide enriching content, participation is entirely voluntary. We assume no responsibility for any personal decisions or interpretations made in response to our discussions. Our aim is to foster a community where curiosity, faith, and understanding can flourish. Thank you for joining us on this journey. In today's topic, we're going to be talking about translations. And it's there's a lot of stuff we can talk about here. So before we get into it, is it okay with you guys if I do a little prayer to get us started? All right.
Go for it, sure.
Oh my God, oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor, and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge, and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art their helper and their Lord. Oh, and to get started, I don't know, do you guys want to get started in a particular way, or do you have any burning points you thought were cool?
The only thing I could think of for this topic, and I'm kind of interested in what you both came up with, is when we talk about translations, like from, I guess, from like a Christian perspective, like the translations are pretty sound. And I don't think it's the translations we run into issues. I think it's the interpretation of the translations. Like looking like Yassine just brought up, looking at things from a Western lens when these weren't like Western religions to begin with, you know. So that's the only point I wanted to make, and then I'm kind of like really interested in what your brother posted earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, actually that's a good point. I The translation and interpretation thing, because like it's for me it kind of feels like um interpretation is kind of an issue, but it's also kind of like a thing that we can't avoid because like we have to, when you read something you have to interpret it, and so like there's always that step of interpretation that's gonna be like maybe kerfuffling God's word or something like that. But let's get into the definition of translation. So translation, the process of translating words from or text from one language to another. Thanks for that definition, Google. um Process of moving something from one place to another. So there's translation in math where, there's like this get it just moves, it translates to that. Um, and then the origin, uh, Latin translatio, uh, meaning carried or across, and that's from Latin. So in terms of, I guess, so it's kind of like, yeah, carrying information across, and there's like this crossing that takes place in a translation. And I think so one of the cool translations that I just wanted to bring up, I've kind of been talking about it too. There was a really good video on it. I could post it in the description. but it's the first word of the Bible, meaning in the beginning. It's Bereshit, and so I guess so. It consists of six letters. Bet. Well, actually, there's a seventh letter in there, or eighth, seven, eight there's like seven or eight because there's the word et in there, but we'll get to that. That's kind of a cool thing too. So Bereshit consists of six letters: Bet, Resh, Aleph, Shin, Yod, and Tav. So um, each of those letters have like an interpretation or symbolic meaning. And so it would be nice if Stephanie was here to kind of like confirm any of this stuff. All this stuff I'm getting from ChatGPT, so take it with a grain of salt. Um, so for bet, it represents a house or tent, symbolizing a place or dwelling. And actually, wait, let's get this word Bereshit on the board here. So let's do a whiteboard thing.
Ooh.
Bereshit.
I was wondering. Yeah, Raj, they're not going to be able to see it in the video.
They're what?
I don't think they're going to be able to see it in the video.
No, they'll see it. They're getting exactly what I'm getting. So
Oh, cool.
yeah. So this is Bereshit, and then here I'll just paste. Oh, that's too much.
I can't see the word.
Are you able to see the whiteboard?
No, I clicked on it, but it's a blackboard.
Huh? Oh, Matt, can you see it?
Yeah, I had to click on the join
Oh,
whiteboard. That's why I questioned.
click on the join button, I guess.
I clicked on the join button, and now I see a blackboard. It says three
Um,
participants of the whiteboard, but I don't. Oh, there it's coming now. It
I
says
think
server
you.
IP address couldn't be
Oh,
found. Hmm.
oh. Well, okay. Well, I'll just talk, but I just put it on the whiteboard because I think it's like nice to just see the symbols and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
So bet is it represents a house or tent symbolizing a place of dwelling or creation. Then there's resh, bere, a head or first, often symbolizing a leader or person of importance. Aleph, this is a symbol of God, representing the divine presence or authority. Shin symbolizes destruction, consuming fire, or divine power. Yod represents a hand or an arm, symbolizing work or effort. And Tav represents a mark or sign, often symbolizing a covenant. In ancient Hebrew, Tav was shaped like a cross, which some Christians interpret as foreshadowing of the crucifixion. So, yeah, I just thought that was cool how um, you see how the meanings of these the symbols have deeper meanings and they kind of add up. So, like, you have this dwelling place, and that's bet, so that's kind of the beginning of the word in itself. resh, head. So it's like, I guess that would be maybe Jesus or something, right? Jesus is the leader of this important movement or something. And then Aleph is a symbol of God. So maybe that that head is kind of confirmed to be like some sort of God, divine presence or authority. And then Shin symbolizes destruction, consuming fire. So this is like Jesus sacrificing himself for mankind. And then um or some or yeah, I don't know. I or maybe it's like something to do with heaven and hell or something like that. And the hand or arm symbolizing work or effort is maybe like the the effort Jesus put in to save us, and then Tav is the crucifixion, so symbolizing um the covenant. So like that's when Jesus saved humanity through that blood sacrifice. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on Beresheet?
I think it's really interesting. I've never, I mean, this is beyond gematria even. I didn't realize even the letters have, not the letters, the characters have like individual meaning as well. That
Yeah.
video you sent, I think it was you, Raj, that sent the video about, it was a Hebrew rabbi or something talking about words and just how there's these deep meanings for like every single word in Hebrew. And if you study it, like you understand it, but when you don't study it, like we lose the interpretation or the translation, what you call it, you know? I
Yeah,
think that
yeah,
video.
Yeah.
it's
What
go
I
go
want to
ahead.
say, Sheraj, is that, look, the interpretation, for example, like the what you just did now, right?
Hmm.
A lot of religious scholars do that, okay? But they do it on the basis of doctrine. And often the doctrine is sourced from outside the book.
Mm.
And then it is superimposed on the book as a translation, but really it's the liberty of interpretation that they take uh, from a doctrinal perspective, right? And we see this in all religions, and I've experienced it also in various like translations I've read of the Quran, right? You can kind of pinpoint the orientation of the translator or the extra interpretive data that he used to try to make sense of certain passages. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so for example, what you use the one word now in the beginning, right? Um, as it would be interpreted through as a Christian doctrine, for example, but not obviously a Jewish doctrine, right?
Mm.
So it would probably have some other kind of interpretation, you know. So so that's kind of the translation actually is interpretation. You know, you can't get away from it, right?
Yeah.
And even the people who translate the book in the same language, because that happens too, right? I mentioned that earlier. That's also an interpretation. So people, for example, I've seen it a lot because, like, I live in Arabia, right? So someone might quote a verse of the Quran which is in Arabic, and then translate it into Arabic, into a more modern Arabic, so that the audience can better understand what the verse is saying, right? But what he's offering up is an interpretation, and he's offering up how he's choosing to relate that verse to the particular situation at hand,
Hmm. Hmm.
because he needs the verse to speak to the issue, whatever issue he's discussing, right?
Right.
So there are various uh, sciences, if you will, around translation and interpretation that people study in religion studies, right? Very often, like people who quote textual sources, they're not familiar with these sciences, and they're not able to consistently apply a set of rules as to how they're going to approach interpreting the text. You know what I mean?
Right.
Right.
There's no
They're not
agreement
able
on
to,
how to interpret. So it's
and so it
or is
becomes haphazard and it becomes disjointed.
yeah,
You
yeah.
get what I'm saying? Because they don't
Sure.
have like a set of conventions and say, okay, we're going to interpret every time we see this word, for example, we're going to take it to mean this. Understand?
Yeah.
But when we see this other word, we're going to take it to mean that. And I've seen it a lot with the Quran because I mean, I started out engaging with the Quran, first of all, reading translations. And then I went on to study Arabic, right?
Mm.
And I had to do that because I read translations and I'm like, wait a minute, but this guy translating the verse this way, this other guy is translating it that way, and the other guy is translating it that way. And while the general meaning might be the same, right? The nuances are very different and the results can be very different.
Definitely,
Right? So
yeah.
once you start becoming more of a critical reader, you tell yourself, okay, I gotta go back to the original language. I gotta go back to the Arabic, you know? But then when you go back to the Arabic, you realize the exact same thing happened in Arabic interpretations of the Arabic text.
Mm,
And
there's no
that
getting
makes it
around it.
now even harder. Yes. Yeah. Because I'll give you examples, right? There are various Arabic words in the Quran that the interpreters of the Quran say all mean the same thing. But the Quran uses the words in different ways, so clearly they can't all mean the same thing. But because of trying to sort of create a monolithic religious tradition, for them, in their imagination, it had to mean the same thing so they could have this one thing. Because the Quran talks about a lot of topics in very nuanced ways, and it can yield various outcomes. But in the interest of doctrine, because people want to sort of file it down to one thing, it becomes monolithic. And in order to do that, they have to say that 5 words mean exactly the same thing, for example, you
Mm,
know, uh, to yield the same result every time. So this is a failing on human beings, of course, and also because people tend to want a simplistic approach because it makes life easier, you know,
mhm.
instead of wanting to embrace the diverse outcomes that can result from the same.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind
Like
of one of the things I've known.
one example that comes to mind of that is the word heaven. So
Mhm.
and I think it's similar in Arabic, but Hebrew, um, like at least in the first line of the Bible, when at the like first God created heaven and the earth,
Mhm.
heaven is actually translated as sky. And so um there is like this association with with heaven and sky, but like in the video I saw, he was saying that typically in Hebrew, that word that in the Bible they use for heaven, they typically use that for just sky. And so
Mhm.
that actually, like, in my mind, that creates a pretty big implication because it's like the first thing God made was the sky and the earth. That makes perfect sense because you can see that, right? You see the sky, you see the earth, it's all there, it's very tangible. But then if you say God created the heaven and the earth, heaven's like a place you want to get to, and the earth is like where we are. So it's just like a whole different dynamic when you just change that one word.
Yeah, because it's conflating the English word heaven, which has a dual meaning. In
Yeah.
Old English, in Old English, heaven actually just means sky.
Mm,
But in the more modern usage of the word heaven, we mean the paradise, the nice place that you go to, right?
yeah. Yeah.
So when you say heaven, and now you're going to translate both Hebrew words or Arabic words, sama and Jannah, you're going to translate both as heaven, you're going to create a confusion. For the critical reader, he's going to be like, wait a minute. But here it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then here it's talking about heaven as a place you go to. So
Right.
is the place you go to in the sky? You understand? It creates more questions than answers, which is why I believe that a translation should have an index that allocates, for example, let's say we're translating into English, right? We need to allocate words in English, two words in Hebrew or Arabic or Greek that are specific, just that word, to create a sort of more consistent synopsis of the text.
Mm.
You
Mm.
know, the reason for that is that if you do that, as the text unfolds, because it's a story, right? The meanings that the stories intend to relate will become clear as you read, because it will be consistent at the end.
Yes.
Mm.
You
Yes.
understand?
Yes.
But the problem is that we don't have that very often. I mean, I find it with Quranic translations often. You know, I can point out lots of examples where they use one expression and then it means that, and then they use the exact same expression in Arabic and it means something else. And then I'm like, wait a minute, but it can't mean something else.
What
Because
about
the
context
book,
though? Like does
I'll tell you why
context? Yeah.
it can't mean something else regardless of the context, because the book is like a codex. So what I mean is that the words are explaining itself
Mm.
throughout the book
Mm.
in and of itself. So if it's going to mean something different every time, then it doesn't. You're robbing yourself from a dimension of meaning. And you understand what I'm saying?
Mm.
And so yes, people will tell you, translators will tell you, look, I prefer this word in this context and that word in that context. They will tell you that it's
Oh,
context
right.
driven.
Right.
They'll tell you that. But actually, when you dig deeper, it's actually not context driven, it's doctrinal driven. It's the preconceived tradition or doctrine or sect of the translator that's being superimposed on the translation.
Yeah,
This.
because people, what you're saying is people are like they believe something, and so when they translate it, they're kind of translating it according to what they already believe. So they'll like say, "Oh,
Yes.
this actually means this because this is what it's trying to say," or something like this.
I'll give you one very quick example, right?
Hmm.
Uh, the Quran sanctions the permissibility of polygyny, for example. Okay? So the verse in which people quote that it sanctions the permissibility says that uh, marry the woman of your choice, two, three, or four. So translators translate this to mean literally the numbers two, three, or four. That means you can have up to four wives.
Mm.
Okay? But when you go back to the actual Arabic, right, you come to learn that the expression two, three, or four in Arabic is actually a figure of speech.
Mm.
That means
A
any
few.
number of women. A
Oh,
few.
okay.
It means like marry. Uh, 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 it means like any number of any number of a number of.
Mm.
That's what it
Mm.
means. So it's a
Mm.
figure of speech that they used to use when they said a few, like a few or any number of. This was a figure of speech,
Mm.
right? So it doesn't literally mean two, three, or four, right? In the
Yeah.
language, in the Arabic language, but in the translators, because of doctrine, we have a doctrine that says you can have a maximum of four wives. That's a doctrinal rule,
Mm.
right? They translate it in line with the doctrine, although that doctrine doesn't actually come from the Quran at all. You
Yeah.
understand?
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
So we do that with lots of verses of the Quran. There's doctrinal implications, you know, based on the preconceived notions of what's already established in the law. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Matt, did you have any
No,
thoughts on? Yeah.
yeah, actually, everything you said, you kind of echoed my thoughts. I've had this discussion with uh, somebody close to me. Particularly, I was discussing about the rapture. So I've been doing my own unbiased, unfiltered, unmolested research, just trying to find, definitive truth, I guess I would say. And I'm kind of on the fence that the rapture is not a real thing, man. And it's like something somebody created from, like your brother was saying, just misquoting something, and it talks about how Jesus will take people to the clouds, but then we talked about how sky actually literally just means heaven, or heaven literally means sky. So I was questioning like the interpretation of it, because when they said they take them to the clouds, maybe that does mean heaven, maybe I don't know, man. But in the short, without getting too detailed into the discussion, yeah, the interpretation of things can be skewed by a doctrine that was created outside of the actual canon, right? Uh, so the canon actually had nothing, like, it was probably up to your interpretation. But then somebody created this doctrine, like the rapture, and then they applied it and said, this is what it means. So, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Not to get too deep into that conversation, but yeah.
I mean, there's another example that I think the Christians would like, and that is the idea of the second coming. Now, Muslims in general believe in the second coming, that Jesus will reappear, right?
Yes.
But ironically, there's really nothing in the Quran that tells you that.
Really?
Yes, it
Wow.
is a stretch of interpretation of certain verses that without knowing the doctrine of the second coming, you'd never arrive at that conclusion.
Mm.
Wow. So do
Because the
Muslims?
Quran, the Quran simply says that the Quran says that Jesus was not crucified, okay, nor was he killed, but it was made to appear that way to them. That's what the Quran says, right? And then the Quran says in another verse, totally unrelated, that every soul must taste of death, meaning everyone must die, actually. So they say because Jesus was never uh, killed, right? They interpret that to mean, therefore, he never died, therefore, he needs to come back because he's still alive bodily in heaven with God, and he must come back, and therefore, the second coming. But the truth of the matter is, if we didn't know about a doctrine of the second coming, we would never arrive at that conclusion. You get what I'm saying?
Mm.
So
That's
so
another example of doctrinal influence. Because you must remember that Islam spread very quickly and very far throughout the Christian world, Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire, anyway, right? So, I mean, there's a possibility, and that's my contention anyway, that there's a lot of interpolation between beliefs. Because it's kind of like one of those things that are neither here nor there. It's not like gonna compromise the fundamental beliefs of Islam to believe in a second coming.
Mm.
You get what I'm saying? So people were like, okay, so there's no problem then. We'll leave the leeway for that interpretive license, basically.
So
You know,
interesting.
and that happened with a lot of things, actually. You know?
Hmm.
Yeah.
yeah, so do Muslims like commonly study like other canons as well?
No,
Or
no, Muslims don't ever study other canon commonly, but the Muslim tradition, what Muslims don't know is that as the Muslim tradition formed, a large part of what informs those traditions are actually from other canons. also. They just don't realize it, they don't know it. They think that actually it's just internally Muslim tradition, period, that just formed by in and of itself. But it isn't. The truth is that with conversion and interpolation and interaction between faith traditions, things are adopted and things are discarded and things are there's an exchange, you know. And while that may not relate to the core beliefs, but on the periphery, there are things that people keep with them when they go into a religion, for example. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, because Christians do very similar things where they pull from other texts that's not within the canon itself, and they'll be quick to dismiss text because it's not in the canon, but when it coincides with what they want to believe, they'll be quick to like, hey, look, this is factual, this is confirmation, what we're saying, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously the Bible was, it's a book of books, right? And how those books got in the Bible, there's debate about that, and neither here nor there at the moment. But how are we going to acknowledge, hey, this book that's not in here coincides with what the word, the agenda we're trying to like pass to the population? But it could be something within that same text. No, don't listen to that because it doesn't coincide with our scripture, you know? So you can have this book that you'll say you agree with this point in it, but you won't agree with this point because it doesn't coincide with it. It's like it's either all or nothing to me. So I've been on this little journey for a little while, and exactly what you guys are talking about, like the translations thing, or what we're talking about, apologies, is kind of what I've been dwelling on over the last like 3 or 4 months.
Mm-hmm. You see, the thing is, Matthew, what I had, my struggle was quite difficult actually with reading the Quran because I came from an Islamic studies background. And so I was fully indoctrinated within an Islamic tradition. And so whenever I used to read the Quran, I used to be like, oh yeah, it means this. And that's it, move on. Right? Because I was already filed down into the straight line that they wanted me to walk in. You understand?
Yes, yes.
And I had to undo my indoctrination to actually start really appreciating the Quran. Because the Quran is actually not a doctrinal book. It's a book of life. It's actually not a book of religion. It's a book of life. And the minute you start looking at it that way, it opens up a whole lot of new possibilities. You know? And that was and it took me long to get there because I had to undo my programming, all my religious indoctrination and programming to be able to appreciate that this is actually a book that must relate to all experiences that I personally and the people around me and that society has. You know, and it's not a book of doctrine. Yeah.
So my journey seems to be echo yours. Only I was not indoctrinated. Like obviously I'm not molested by everybody else's thoughts or their preconceptions or their whatever they believe. So I'm reading this like I'm reading it for the first time, and I'm like developing my own opinion, my own thought, my own whatever else we want to call it. And I find it's frustrating for me personally, is when you talk to like different denominations, uh, everybody has their thing, and nobody can agree on anything, and everybody's right and everybody's wrong. And what I gathered is we're like arguing about things that aren't even salvation issues. like according to Christian scripture, right? And yeah, that's the conclusion that I've arrived to. So
So
I got
okay,
into kind
so
of
there's one thing I wanted to translate that my because my uncle and I were, having a lively discussion, and a big line that causes like that I from what I see a lot of it gives people Christians like it the exclusivity, or like it's like, you know there's John 14 kind of talks about what Jesus said, and it has this exclusion type thing. So just to read it a little bit, um John 14 verses 5 through 6 says, uh Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus
very
answered,
place.
I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So a lot of people use that line to say like, oh, Muslims, uh, Jews, like everyone else is going to hell. It's only Christians that are going to heaven or something like that. And so, I was like, okay, well, let's dig in a little bit into the translation. So I didn't really that though it seems to pretty much say that from like the from the Greek. So there's no weirdness in the translation, but I just kind of wanted to say it anyway because it's kind of cool to hear the Greek. So uh I'll just say all Greek first. Ego eimi he hodos kai he aletheia kai he zui oidis erketai pros ton patera imi de emo. And it that literally means I am and it says feminine article for the, so that's kind of interesting. Um, the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to or toward and then in this it's like a masculine article, which is interesting. Uh, Father, well, I guess father is like the masculine. So the is referring to father, therefore it's a masculine. What was the? The way, the path, what the path apparently is a female feminine thing. I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
okay,
You
hold on.
see, in
Yeah,
those type of languages, your words are either masculine or feminine.
yes.
Yeah,
So it's not
yeah,
deep.
Spanish.
Like even in Arabic, tariqa is a word, an Arabic word,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, well,
It's
like
also feminine, I believe. You know,
like the word
it
dog.
has nothing to do with female. It's just that
Yes,
words are either masculine or feminine.
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
sure, sure. So it's like the way is like a feminine thing, and so
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
that's
like
kind
in
of
Arabic, for example, siyara, a car,
yeah,
is
yeah,
feminine.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
nothing feminine about it, but it's a feminine word.
yeah,
You
yeah.
get what I'm saying? Yeah. Mm.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like you would call it a feminine word because it has some sort of feminine quality. I would say for the car, it's like movement is the feminine quality or something like that. But
Mm.
I don't know. That's abstract thinking.
It's just no. In Arabic, you don't get any word that's outside of the gender. It's either masculine
There,
or feminine. Every single word. Yeah.
What
gotcha.
about
Yeah,
what about the non-binary words? All right, let's go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let's go.
nice. So, yeah. So, my question. Oh, no one comes to or toward the Father if or except. In this context, it's except, but a means if. Not through or by me. So that's like the literal translation, which is kind of cool to hear. And my question though is to Yassine. So um, the question is, if Muslims accept Jesus, then how do they like explain Jesus saying this?
Okay, Muslims wouldn't have a problem with that saying at all,
Mm,
except that, of course, we would say the Father being God, right?
yeah, yeah,
Because in Islamic ideology, every prophet charged with the responsibility of bringing a message from God, right, is the absolute authority on that and must be believed in and accepted as God's prophet and messenger. And then absolutely there's no way around him. Get what I'm saying? So we would say, yes, absolutely. But there is no way to God except through Jesus. You know, because Jesus being the authority on what God sent to him. So you'd have to follow him. You know?
So what
But then
maybe
of
what
course the Muslims would say,
yeah,
Muslims would go on then to say that of course Jesus was Muslim. That's how
sure,
they would
sure.
He was
understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Islam, right? He was
Yeah.
of Islam. Islam just means to surrender, right?
To surrender, exactly. So we say all the prophets are Muslim, those who submit to God, and religion is one. And so
Well,
we don't have a problem. So if you say there's no way through to the Father except through me, we'd be like, yeah, duh, of course.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
question.
Man.
What is Muslim and what is Muslim and what is Islam?
Sorry.
Okay. Islam means a way to attain peace through submitting to God, right? And Muslim is the one who tries to submit to God.
Mm.
Wow. So Muslim and Islam is not even necessarily a religion. It's like a state of being.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And that's kind of the battle I have with my own community, in that I always tell them there is the qualitative thing, which is Muslim qualitatively, a person who tries to submit to God, and then there is the group label, a person who belongs to a set community, right, called a Muslim. And these two are not necessarily the same, you know? Because technically, look, I mean, this is the problem I'm having right now. Because technically, look, in the Islamic theology, if a person says there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger, that person is a Muslim. Whether he prays or fasts or murders or whatever, that person is a Muslim, right? Because he has given the testimony of faith. And none of us are allowed to say that he's not a Muslim.
So I have a question.
Get what I'm saying? So that kind of, me, I was like, no, maybe what ought to be meant by that is that's the step you take into like the religion. But then your actual being Muslim should depend on like uh, qualitatively on your actually trying to submit, trying to be a better person, in other words. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of the there's these two things happening in religion all the time, you know?
So I have a
I think
question.
it's
Can you
yeah.
be a Muslim and a Christian at the same time?
Um, well, the short answer to that is no,
Huh?
um, because one of the fundamental principles of Islam is, and the biggest argument basically in Islam is that to believe that God has children is wrong. Is a negation of belief in one God.
Maybe that was
And
a translation thing.
or to believe that God can be one persons of three, kind of thing, the Trinity.
Mm,
So if it wasn't for that, then the answer would have been yes. Yes.
mhm.
No?
So because the fundamental at the base most basic fundamental aspect of it is God cannot manifest himself in man form, human
Exactly. Yes.
form. Okay, that's the simple answer.
Yes.
Because of that only. However, I think what Raj was asking, if you acknowledge that, like, if you're one that believes that Jesus Christ is God and you submit to God, would that by definition make you Muslim? Is that what you're asking, Raj?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was just like, if you submit to Jesus and you submit to Muhammad, then why can't you be Christian and Muslim? They say, yeah.
But you see what the thing is this, Sharaj.
Maybe I'm a
We don't
Christian that
hold,
doesn't believe the Trinity and call ourselves children of God, maybe I'm that type of Christian. I don't know.
you see, the thing is the Muslim doesn't believe that he's submitting to Muhammad.
Are you
Because he
submitting to
believes
Oh,
God?
Muhammad is just a messenger of God.
right. Oh,
Right?
okay.
We don't attribute divinity to any man, no matter how special or important or whatever his function was,
Yeah.
you know? And that's
Huh.
kind of the fun. So the Quran's invitation is to Christians is to denounce uh, the belief that Jesus is God or the Son of God.
Can I push
And
back
then by the
on,
Quran, that's the Quran's sort of assertion.
can
And
I push,
then the Quran is saying, okay, if you denounce that, then you're acceptable. You understand? Yeah.
wait, if you denounce what?
If you denounce the belief that Jesus is God and the Son of God, or the Son of God, right? That's what the Quran calls Christians to do. In fact,
Oh,
the Quran directly addresses Christians and says, renounce that.
oh,
Wow.
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Hey, what verse is that? Nassim?
Let me get it for you.
Yeah, just put it in the chat if you can, man.
Okay. Okay, I'll get it. In the meantime, you guys can carry on.
Yeah, I forgot what I was gonna ask now. Shoot.
No, the idea, like you're giving me a whole different perspective of Islam. I've always looked at Islam like not like Christianity, but like how Islam's a religion, and the way you explain it, it actually makes sense. Islam means the submitting to God essentially, and Muslim is one who performs that act. So it's not like Islam is this religion; it's like a state of being.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty. I wonder if a lot of people know that.
A lot of people don't know that. Even a lot of Muslims don't know that.
Yeah, so you can't say like the religion Islam, because I guess by using your definition, from looking at it from a Christian perspective, like Christians are Muslims or Islam of Islam. Like we believe what we believe in God is we submit to God from our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Just we believe it differently than Muslims do, obviously, and the fundamental difference is as different as it can get. We're talking about salvation issues, what we're essentially talking about.
I remembered what I wanted to ask. I wanted to push back against the idea of Muhammad not being like sanctified in some way, because it kind of feels like he's sanctified to me for Islam. But I don't know. But then there's the idea like you can't draw a picture of Muhammad, otherwise that's like bad. So doesn't isn't that kind of a form of sanctification? Because like any other person you could draw them, but with him we can't. So I don't know. What do you
Well, you see, the reason why the Muslims have that rule is because they don't want to happen with Muhammad what happened with Jesus. So they don't want people
with
to
idol worshiping?
begin to idolize, yes, to make him an idol. So that's
But
the
then,
reason
like,
why Islam prohibits, because we follow the Ten Commandments, right? One of
mm-hmm,
them is not to have engraven images.
mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So engraven images isn't allowed in Islam. In fact, it wasn't only about Muhammad. For a long time in Islam, they didn't even allow photography. It's only in
Really?
modern times when they, yes, it's only in modern times when photography became a very famous thing, that they sort of de-escalated and said, okay, there's no danger in it anymore. It doesn't relate to revering images.
Oh, okay. That's so interesting. Yeah.
But for a long time, I mean, there were already cameras all around the world, and Muslim countries still didn't want to do photography,
Yeah. Yeah.
because of the whole fear of engraven images and revering uh, images of people, creating idols out of people that they like, whatever. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even only the Prophet, but it's just now the rule. Uh, Obviously, because the Prophet is a revered person amongst Muslims, they don't want that reverence to go overboard.
Mm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that
Yeah.
that that does make sense. But I do feel like it ironically creates a form of sanctification because like drawing a picture of him is so against the rules that yeah, but it makes perfect sense. So I'm totally like yeah, I'm
Oh
okay
no,
with
I
it.
mean, don't get me wrong. The Prophet Muhammad is very sanctified in Islam,
Mm.
and not only the Prophet Muhammad, all prophets. Remember, Muslims believe that prophets are sinless,
Or
that they're
what?
human beings, but they
Sinless.
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 They're human beings, yes, they're human beings that didn't have the motivation to sin ever, even once. You know,
So
so
question,
so
question about
for Muslims, prophets are very high up there. You know.
question about that. So like the prophets, we go back to like obviously you guys acknowledge like Elijah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, all those prophets, right? Those are prophets you acknowledge as well.
Yeah.
Where did the source of the stories from those prophets come from?
You frozen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Oh yes. Where did the
Uh,
source of the you say the source of the stories come from?
yeah.
Yeah?
So like obviously the way like we're taught about the prophets from a Christian perspective is they were anything but perfect, and these are the people that God used.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah. So
So what
where
happens is, so I'll tell you what happens, okay? If you read the Quran, you will notice that the stories are retold in the Quran. There are 25 prophets mentioned. And the stories are retold in such a way to edit out the bad bits that are in the Bible.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the prophets in the Quran are just like amazing, right? But I mean, when you read in the Bible and some of the stories there are very bad, quite frankly. You know, I mean, they
Yeah.
portrayed in a negative light, having done uh, terrible things.
Yep.
The Quran just doesn't mention any of it.
Wow.
Mm.
Interesting.
Because you see, the thing is, the Quranic sort of message around the prophets is that God sent these prophets to be examples for people. So, of course, if that's kind of the message it's giving, it's going to portray the good, like how good they were. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, man.
And then the way the Muslim theologians explain things that are like sort of bad, like for example, Jonah um, ran away according to the Quran, right? He got on the ship to leave his people because he got tired of preaching to them, and he was thrown overboard. And the way they will explain things like that, because that's like not doing your job, right? So that's bad. You'd say that's bad, right? They explain that no, it was by way of demonstration. That even the seemingly bad things that prophets do, they are inspired as a demonstration to the people around them, because God uses them instruments of lessons. They are instruments for lessons that God teaches. through them. So
Now
that's kind of how they sort of resolve the issue of when you can maybe cite something that would be bad, quote unquote.
that uh, exactly how you just described, like those lessons, is exactly how we're taught as Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Um, these errors or these mistakes that these flawed individuals made, God used them. I mean, there were there's this misconception like there were no consequences for their actions. There were definitely consequences for like all of
Mm-hmm.
their sins in there, and you could see it if you read the Bible. You could see it from generations. Like generations are paying for it later,
Mm-hmm.
but God still rocked with them, which was really cool. And like when we talk about, we're gonna get a little controversial here again. So when we talk about the Israelites, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throughout all of Scripture, these were just a people that just were disobedient, stubborn. Even the name where Israel came from, the name Jacob, he wrestled with an angel or a messenger of God, right? Like got into a literal fight. That's how stubborn he was. And Jacob was kind of like a grimy, deceitful con artist, whatever you want to call him. And like God's like, that's still my people. I rock with them. Like, yeah, they're jacked up. I know they are. But my promise to Abraham was, I'm going to take care of you, basically. No matter what. No matter what. No matter how jacked up you are, no matter how bad the world says how jacked up you are, because we could, we might get canceled for this. But we can clearly see, like, today, that still applies.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. You see now the difference is, Matthew, the Quran is a meritocracy. Through and through, the Quran is a meritocracy. So when Noah, for example, is on his ark, the story goes, his son climbs to the highest mountain. He says, "Don't worry, Dad, I'm going to climb to the highest mountain. I'm going to survive the flood." Right? Noah says, "No, God has ordered us to embark on the ark, and that whoever's going to be on the ark will be saved." Right? And Noah's son said, "Look, I can take care of myself." You know, I'm paraphrasing, right? I'm modernizing it.
Yes.
So, finally, the ark reaches the level of the highest mountain, and Noah sees his son. And Noah says to God, "God, what about your promise you made to me?" And then God says to him that my bounty does not extend to the unjust. And the issue is, here it shows that it's a meritocracy because the Quran says the prophets were all family one of another, chosen by God. The chosenness theme is in the Quran also, right? But it didn't mean that just because your father was a prophet, you were going to get away. So, in a way, the Quran kind of revises that chosenness. On the one hand, it acknowledges it. It says we chose them. On the other hand, it says, look, but because of their wrongdoing, they were punished. So it has a meritocracy going there. It doesn't matter who your daddy is. The Quran is saying.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. There's been instances where the Israelites were forced to like live under slavery as a punishment, right? Uh, we're basically saying the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I talk to you, it makes me feel really, really good because like it's amazing how similar Islam and Christianity actually is.
Yeah,
Eh,
even through the differences and like
yeah,
even the stark
yes.
differences, there's still like some linearities on both sides.
So obviously we disagree on the prophets and we disagree on the salvation issue, but like I think at the fundamental, like where we're at, like it's very similar. I don't know how to explain it because when I try to explain this to Christians, you're like, quit talking to the Muslims. You know, they don't know anything. Stop talking to them. You know, like I'm like, no, like I don't. We don't get into these issues. The only people I have arguments with are other Christians. You know, me and this, we actually almost agree on everything, and the stuff we disagree on, we're just like, oh, okay, let's not even talk about it. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You said what you said, I said what I said, and we heard each other out. Okay, we still disagree. Cool. You know? But even though, like, we disagree on these, like, big issues, it seems like the 90s, probably like the 93% that's in between these issues, like, we're pretty much the same.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is that as Christians and Muslims, there should be no reason why we can't live in peace,
Exactly.
as we have for generations, actually. You know, and it's usually people who are focused on these differences that seek to create hatred between people. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I like to hear, Allah is not God. You're like, huh? I think that literally means, you know what I mean? Like, I think it literally means he is, you know? Yeah, Allah is not God. Like, it's not a name. It literally just means, you know? And I actually learned that from you because you're the one that informed me that even Christian Arabs call God Allah.
Yes. And Jews, Christian Jews too. I mean, Arab Jews. Yeah.
Arab Jews, yeah.
Yeah.
They call God Allah. Yeah, crazy.
So another word I wanted to get in this translation session was Dharma. I thought that was a pretty cool one. And do you guys know what Dharma is?
Dharma.
Doesn't ring a bell. Maybe I do, maybe I don't.
So Dharma is translated as um, duty or purpose. But it's as I'm going to show you now.
Is it
It's
Sanskrit? Is it in Sanskrit? Which
I
language is it?
I believe,
Sanskrit.
yeah, I believe this would be Sanskrit. And so it has three sounds. Da. Okay, let's do another one. Da, ra, and ma. Oh wait, oh, four sounds, I'm sorry. Ah, dharma. So the da in dharma, um, it represents effort and persistence, which is integral to the concept of dharma. The sound conveys strength and the necessity of effort to uphold moral and cosmic order. Da, da, da. Feels very hard, da, you know? Um, in Sanskrit, aspiration often connotes depth or significance, so the aspirated da can be seen as denoting the depth and strength required to follow one's duties and responsibilities. And then the second one is ra, and ra is a soft rolling R sound, and it's often associated with energy or movement. Ra symbolizes activity, movement, or flow. This is important in the context of Dharma as living in accordance with Dharma is dynamic and requires continuous effort and engagement with the world. And then there's ma. So ma is a soft nasal sound, I guess, ma. And ma in Sanskrit represents the self or me, but also stands for balance and nurturing. The nasal sound softens the word and imbues it with a sense of compassion and nurturing, qualities essential to Dharma. And then uh, is a vowel and the most primal sound in Sanskrit, Allah, akin to the universal sound Om. Ah is the sound of creation and represents beginnings, continuity, and essence. It is the breath of life and often reflects the eternal nature of cosmic principles. In the context of Dharma, this vowel could be understood as representing the ever-present and fundamental nature of righteousness and duty in the cosmos. So, yeah, I thought that was super cool. Dharma, 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 and I don't know, it's kind of cool. I feel like I'm pronouncing it the right way for the first time in my life, maybe. Dharma, Dharma. And I thought it was cool too how it has like I me like this is just my own interpretation. I kind of see a little bit of the Trinity in here. If you don't include the so the um the da and the da is like dad and the ma is like mom and then the ra is like the son or something. So I don't know. I feel like that's like a little Trinity or something like that. And I thought that was kind of a uh fun exploration of the word dharma.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that what you're doing, Sheraj, that's like at a whole nother level, you know,
Yeah.
because people do interpretations. Of course, they usually interpret sentences and whole words, not letter for letter, you know.
Sound for sound.
Um, yeah, sound for sound. Yeah, that's on a whole other level. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
The mystics, like in every tradition, they're quite fond of that, you know,
Uh,
looking into the sort of mystical meaning of each letter and each sound and each syllable, to correspond with some sort of spiritual practice. You know, to develop spiritually, they use sounds and letters, and you know, and that's like a whole nother layer to revelation. You know,
mm. It's a reminds me of
um,
what Matt talks about, to keep looking into Kabbalah or something like that.
Yeah, that's
yeah, yeah.
what I was
So that's
telling you.
kind of that kind of issue. Now in the Quran, there are letters. These are called the cut letters, right?
Mm,
That also just don't. They literally don't have a meaning that we know of
mm,
because they're not actual words, right? And some people, like interpreters, say that these sounds have like special spiritual purposes. You know, that they open up like the heavens, or they, you know, create
mm.
certain vibrations that are cosmic vibrations, etc. And so you have several chapters that just start with these random letters, Arabic letters, you know, um,
Interesting.
which
And
might
and
relate.
so
Yeah,
it's just a sound or something that do you
the
actually
letters
say it
just
or
you just read the letters and they make a sound and that's it. But they don't
that's
have
it?
like it's not a word,
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, very
you
interesting.
know. Yeah,
Do you wanna do I got an Arabic word, Rahman?
Rahman.
Rahman? Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause
What
so
about it?
ChatGPT was saying Rahman means the most merciful, while the word is often translated simply as merciful, it carries a deeper connotation of compassionate mercy that encompasses all creation. In Islamic theology, is used to describe God's mercy in its universal form, contrasting with Rahim, which refers to God's mercy specifically toward believers. The distinction, while subtle in translation, highlights the different dimensions of divine mercy. So, I don't know, maybe you can
Yeah.
like, yeah.
The Quran starts with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful. Right? Now, almost every chapter in the Quran starts with these words, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the compassionate, the merciful, emphasizing these are two names of Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, emphasizing Allah's compassion and His mercy over everything else. There's many attributes or names are attributed to Allah in the Quran. But these are the main, like, so Allah, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, the three names. So, I mean, what you read on Chat GPT, that's generally what all the scholars say, that Ar-Rahman, the compassionate, this is Allah's compassion for all of His creation, regardless of whether they're good or bad. So, for example, the murderer or the rapist still gets to have a cup of coffee and eat dinner. Right? This is part of the mercy Allah has on all His creation, regardless of who they are, what they do, what they like, etc. But then Ar-Rahim, the second name, this is also denotes compassion and mercy. It has the same meaning, but it's special mercy, and this is the mercy of guidance. That is, those people that God has guided to truth. So this is not just the mercy of being able to eat and drink and procreate and live, because God feeds everyone, right? But it is the mercy of being able to eat and be appreciative and being able to give thanks and being able to acknowledge God. And so that's a different meaning to that name. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's
Whereas the
beautiful.
name Allah, Allah in Arabic,
Mm.
Allah encompasses all the names of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
You know?
like I'm just curious about the symbols. Uh so I see this like this first one here. Um it's like a I don't know. It's like an italicized I, but so that's the Ra sound, Ra.
I can't see what you. It doesn't display on my thing.
Oh man.
It's blocked. Yeah. But
I guess it's just I don't know. Like do the symbols in Arabic denote like tongue shapes or like why are the symbols like the way they are? Like is there like some because like for Hebrew, we saw that it had like the uh be, be, bet and that was like a
mhm.
house and it actually looked kind of like a little cave house thing. So does Arabic have something like that or
Well, look, even the words you mentioned that bait is house in Arabic also. Hebrew and Arabic share a lot of the same vocabulary.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool.
You know, that's why in Israel, for example, people speak Hebrew, but a lot of people who speak Hebrew also speak Arabic.
So
Yeah.
on an I was also curious about the word et. So et is a neat symbol and they use it in Hebrew and it's actually not like it doesn't have a meaning to it. It's just like an extra it's kind of like that sound thing that you mentioned earlier, but it's like an extra word and it's the first and last letter of the Hebrew uh Aleph and Talif, or Aleph and ta, uh,
And Alif,
Tav.
Alif is the first letter in the Arabic alphabet also, Alif.
Yeah, yeah. That's yeah, it's the same. Oh my God. And what's the last letter in Arabic? It's Tav for Hebrew.
So yeah, in Arabic, yeah.
What is it in Arabic?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay, okay. Neat. This so Hebrew has this word et, and so they stick it in like various parts of like sentences and stuff, and it doesn't actually add or take away to the meaning. It's just, but to be grammatically correct, you're supposed to use it, I guess.
Okay, okay.
Is
Yeah.
there a equivalent Arabic thing like that?
Um, yeah, there could be, yes, yes. For example, if a word is feminine, there'll be a t sound at the end.
Mm.
A ta marbuta, it's called, a closed ta. But then that's because the word is feminine. Yeah, if a word is feminine and another word comes after that word, you have to say the t sound. If the word is feminine and it comes right at the end of the sentence, there's no need to say the t sound. So
Oh,
I'll give you an
okay.
example. Then the name Fatima, it's a common name, Fatima, is
Mm-hmm.
actually Fatima Tun. Fatima, the t sound at the end.
Oh, huh.
But because it's a name by itself, you can just say Fatima. You don't say the t sound at the end.
Oh.
But if it were in a sentence, the name Fatima was before something, okay,
Mm-hmm.
then you would say the t. So the name, the famous daughter of the Prophet, they have like a nickname for her, like a laqab. It's called a laqab. It's like a beautification of a name, like a further beautification of a name, like a praise, right? So they say, so her name is Fatima. So they say Fatima to Zahra
Mm.
because there's another word after her name. Zahra means the flower, you
Hmm.
know. So that's like a praise, like something nice to add to a name, you know.
Cool.
So
Okay. Yeah.
Fatima to Zahra. So um, yeah,
All right. Yeah, that's yeah, languages are cool and interesting like that. Let me just real fast. So et is kind of cool. This is what ChatGPT says about it. In Hebrew grammar, et is called the direct object marker. It's you. Oh, well, so this is a little different from what I said earlier because apparently, like ChatGPT is saying it has this thing. So, okay. Uh, direct object marker. It's used to indicate that the word following it is the direct object of the sentence. In Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Et precedes the heavens and the earth, marking that them as the objects of God's objects of God's act of creation. Um,
yes, you have something similar in Arabic also. Yes,
oh, okay,
but
okay.
it's denoted by the sound. The direct object is noted by the sound ah. Ah.
Ah,
So that is called mansub. It's ah. So in Arabic you have diacritical marks like vowels, and it's ah, e, and u.
ah.
And depending on where the word falls in the sentence, it will either be a u word or a word or a e word.
Oh, yeah,
So,
yeah,
so
it has like big,
I'll give you a
yeah.
short example, right? If you put a preposition in front of the noun following the preposition has to be a e word, has to have an I sound.
Can you give an example?
Yes, so if I say something is in my car, okay, so my phone, I would say al jawal, my phone,
Huh?
okay, is in the car. I will say fis siyara ti because fi is a preposition. So now the word which is normally sayyara tu or sayyaratun, I will say fis siyara ti because I'm putting a preposition in front of the word.
You know, I'm sorry, Yassine. I don't
You lost.
understand.
You lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the word fi is a preposition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it means in.
Okay.
Okay, and the word sayyara means car.
Oh, okay. That sounds like cell phone in my
Now,
head.
if I want to
Yeah.
say that in the car, I will say fis sayyarati. I'll end the word car with the I sound because I put a preposition in front of it.
Oh, because
In
you're
Arabic,
that emphasizes that the car is the object of interest or something.
yeah, yes, because yes, exactly. So that's like Arabic works like that too.
Oh, okay.
Everything must tie to everything else in the structure.
Hmm.
Yeah. So it's
But
more
yeah,
complicated than English, obviously, because in English you can
yeah.
just use one word the same way every time. In Arabic, the word has to change
Based on where it
vowels
is in the
depending
sentence.
based on where it's located in the sentence. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like it makes me think it must be impossible to live in that, like, speaking that language because it's just like so confusing. Like, I feel like society gets stratified based on like who can speak well and who can, like, who doesn't know. And then, I don't know, you get all this um classism stuff.
Yeah, it's true. You do get that, yes. But a lot of people, like the average Arab, they don't speak grammatically correct.
Oh, okay.
They just throw words together, and then that's it. There you go.
There
Everybody's
you go.
chill. Yeah. It's
Okay,
only the
cool.
people that are educated that speak grammatically correct.
I
So
see. I
yes,
see.
they
So,
need the education because you will know whether someone is educated by the way they can speak Arabic.
yeah.
So people that work in government, people that work in law, people that when they need to like do a radio broadcast or a television thing, they'll speak proper Arabic and they'll speak correctly. So
Mhm.
you'll know, okay, this person is educated.
So, like in street, like on this in street Arabic, do they like mess up? Like, do they not like if it's in the middle of the sentence, they'll use the wrong word that's like at the beginning or something, or does that not happen? Is that like,
Oh yeah, no, yeah. They just don't care. They just like Arabic is more like on the average level, the street level, it's like throwing words together.
oh, okay, yeah,
And it's
and then you
like
just make sense of it.
yeah, and you kind of get the sense of it. And the last vowel on the end of the word, they just leave it out instead of
Mm.
trying to figure out what it should be. They just leave it out
Oh,
because the,
yeah,
the, the structure isn't grammatically correct anyway to begin with. So it's just
sure.
like throwing words together, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So yeah, street Arabic is easier to understand for
Mm,
that reason because you just kind of need to kind of guess the meaning based on the combination of words they throw together, you know?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm.
But that's also why the Quran is often, in a way, explained by scholars from Arabic into Arabic. Because the level of literacy that you need to understand the Quran is much higher than the average person knows.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's actually more difficult for Arabs than non Arabs. Because you see, when I did Arabic, I went directly to the Quran Arabic. So I didn't get confused between the local language and the Quran. But when your
Mm,
language is Arabic, I feel like it's harder to access the Quran Arabic because you already have an Arabic that's all messed up in a way, in a sense.
mm,
You know?
mm.
You know? Yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Matt, you're muted.
Sorry. So it's like English, old English type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
a lot deeper than that, though. A lot deeper than that.
I
So
got you.
Arabic grammar is very intense. I mean, one word in Arabic can be morphed into 60 different words. Same word.
mm.
Yeah.
So one of my questions was, how much of an effect do translations have on the meaning of scripture? Do you guys think, in your opinion, I guess?
So my opinion, they have like a huge effect.
Hmm.
Uh, ask the question one more time. Let me make sure I'm not.
No, you're answering it perfectly correct. And maybe just go into like how you've seen it affect stuff. But how much of an effect do translations have on the meaning of scripture?
Well, yeah. So you talked about the word sky, and I've talked about that probably at least probably half a dozen times. And when people hear the word sky in English, like you mentioned, Yasin, there's no like meaning behind it. We think of sky, we think of, oh, look, the blue thing up there. That sometimes rain comes down, or snow, or sometimes it's cloudy, whatever. But that's literally the word that is used not only just in Arabic but also in Hebrew to describe what God created. It's not the when it was translated, God created heavens and the earth. It gives it this whole different meaning that, oh, look, he actually created heaven first. Well, no, I'm saying he created the sky and the land first. You know, which you can get into a whole different discussion going that direction with. I don't know if you ever watched like Ancient Aliens and things like that, but that's a whole nother uh, debate. But yeah, so 100%, the way you translate things can have uh, a completely different meaning depending on the language that it's being translated into. You know what I mean? So that's just one example.
Yeah, I think that translations are a good place to start, you know. And what you should do, because translations can be dangerous when taken literally, you know. People read something and they're like, "Oh, God says I got to do this," but it's actually the interpretation of the translator, who turned out to be, I don't know, some extremist. Who knows, you know? So the thing is, I believe that you gotta take a translation with a very big grain of salt,
Mhm.
and you gotta sort of read 4 or 5 different translations. And the whole time that you read those 4 or 5 different translations, you gotta keep an open mind. Don't think that anything you're reading means what it says, right? Because at least that way you get an overview of the text and you get a gist of the meaning. Because that's the point of a translation, is to give you the gist of the meaning. And then if you're really serious about uh, any text that you're reading, you're gonna have to study the language enough to uh, understand the text in the original language. Now, by the way, that's not so difficult to do the way people make it sound.
Really?
You don't have you don't have to speak Arabic to understand the Quran in Arabic, for example,
Oh, yeah.
or you don't have to speak Hebrew to read the Torah in Hebrew, because you see the thing is, um, the Quran and the Bible, it uses a certain limited number of words, vocabulary words, and it often uses those words over and over and over again, the same words. So if you
Mm,
study the words that it uses the majority of the time, and you study the grammar that goes along with those sentence structures, that would take you about 6 months.
Wow.
You understand? And then you would be able to get 80% of the meaning in Arabic. It's really not that deep the way people make it seem. You understand? That's not going to enable you to speak Arabic, because you're not studying Arabic to speak it. Because you can study languages for different purposes. You understand?
yeah.
Um, and obviously, speaking the language of the Quran Arabic, will take you many years, because that's a more dynamic. You creating language by speaking. You know, it's more of a dynamic thing. But reading text in Arabic, you can do that quite easily. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
That's good. That's good encouragement. I went to a mosque and the imam there said that yeah, to learn Arabic it's best to learn it through the Quran because um
yeah,
yeah, and well, I don't know. God also helps you learn too, so there is that.
yeah. So definitely, the Quran. What's nice about the Quran is that it's very repetitive. It uses
Mm,
the same words and phrases redundantly a lot in different ways, and so you get the gist of those meanings, and the next thing you know, you understand most of what's written there.
that's awesome.
So
Yeah, I
it
didn't
is
know.
actually a very easy book to learn. People don't realize how easy it is.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely seems hard to me just from looking at even the two words we looked at, I was like it it it's just, it's so foreign.
Yeah. Yeah, but once you familiarize yourself with it, like let's say the first month would be difficult because you're learning the alphabet and the sounds and how to pronounce things. But once you
Mm-hmm.
familiarize yourself with, you can read, right? You can
Mm.
read in about a month, right?
Mm.
Then it's just a matter of understanding the vocabulary, 80% of which is repetitive in the Quran,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then from there, it's smooth sailing, really.
Yeah, I think you're underestimating
That's
my
cool.
stupidity, man.
Yeah. You know, I mean, that's what I've seen. I've seen a lot of people make like this whole big fuss that it's like so impossible, and those are usually people that they're not encouraging. They want to like be the only people that can, you know. But actually, it's really not that deep, you know.
Mm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Wow.
Mhm.
Did anyone
Because I
have
mean,
any final?
that's what I always say. I always say, why is it are these books, right, in foreign languages, right? If you are serious about the book, shouldn't you study the language of the book? No,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's how you show your seriousness, right? If you like serious about the Torah, nobody's gonna take you seriously. You can't quote it in Hebrew, right? Or you can't. Not that people need to take you seriously, but I mean, you're not even taking yourself seriously. You can't read it in Hebrew. No?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think. I think the Bible should be quoted in Greek and read in Greek and studied in Greek, and the Torah should be done in Hebrew and the Quran in Arabic,
Oh,
because those are the languages.
that actually brings up a question. My uncle, he'll read the Bible with like an app that has like different translations and it'll connect you to the original Greek and stuff like that. So, shoot, I forget what the app name is, but do you guys have any like any apps or something you would recommend other people check out for stuff like that?
My wife has that app you just talked about it just automatically. You can look up any verse and it'll give you like the word in Greek and it'll give you like what the whole meaning behind the word. I can't remember what the name of that app was.
Oh, okay, okay. They're out there though.
Yeah,
Yes.
they are. I mean, with the Quran.com also does the same thing with the Arabic. You
Nice.
can like do, and that's the other thing. If you read the Quran in English and you do like and you taught yourself to read Arabic, and you do sort of a word for word translation without studying Arabic, just reading it a lot, word for word translation. After a while, you'll read the Arabic and you'll be like, oh, I totally understand the Arabic. You know?
That's
Because
cool.
that's sort of, there's an amazing thing that happens is that the Arabic sort of unravels itself for you. And then pretty soon you're reading it in Arabic and you get a sense of what it means in Arabic, even over and above the translation that you've been reading.
Wow.
Because it sort of comes together. You know?
Yes. Yeah. That's what the like people were saying about, yeah, like just um the scripture is you when you read it in English, um it's great and everything, but when you read in Arabic you get like this uh like there's this it's like more pure, right? It's more
Yeah.
um and you get that pure interconnectedness of the language itself that I don't know. Can you explain it a little? Like what does that feel like? Because you understand,
Well,
yeah.
first of all, you know, it feels like you're doing something sacred because you're reading the Word of God
Mm,
in the language that it was revealed on the tongue of the prophet. So it's like it's connecting you to 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 what the prophet originally said and how he said it.
yeah,
You understand?
it's
The
amazing.
word of God through the tongue of the prophet, and now you uttering those same words on your tongue. There's something special about that. You know, that makes you feel connected to the whole story of the book and
Yeah.
everything, you
But
know?
what you're talking about actually just I was talking about this with my wife. Like how you guys Muslims for example, they don't have like these translation issues because they still use the original language, you know? I mean, obviously you do have the translation issues, but not as deep as we do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's been translated um, from Greek to Italian to English and
Mm-hmm.
many different languages, obviously. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the fact that like you said, you're speaking in the tongue that it originally was spoken into,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot to be said about that.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then also the way that the Quran sounds, right, is also uh, like soothing, you know. So it's actually quite amazing. It's quite amazing actually, you know, to be connected to that, um, to be connected to the Quran in that way. That it also is the same book that was written 1,400 years ago, it's the same book. And because millions of people have been reciting it and millions of people recite it over the world, it's almost like it takes on a whole spiritual dimension of its own when you're reading it. Because it's like it makes you part of all of that whole tradition of it, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So,
especially
yeah.
found that very cool when like I'm not able to speak it, but just listening to it, and just like being able to hear like, wow, this is what people were listening to for many, many years, in a very
Mm-hmm.
reverent state. And even I went to the Coptic Orthodox Church too, and they would speak Aramaic. Or no,
Mm-hmm.
Coptic. They would,
Arabic.
huh?
Arabic. The Coptics are Egyptian.
Yeah, but like it wasn't Arabic they were reading. They were reading Coptic, I think. So it was a bit
Oh,
different. Yeah.
okay.
It was a little more like Greek, I think.
Okay. Mhm.
But it was cool because it was very yeah, you feel like you're connecting with maybe, people who lived before you and stuff like that, and
Mm.
that's cool.
And I think that even outside of the fact that you believe in a book, just being able to read something that is that old takes you outside of your own present moment and your own limitations
Mm,
and transports you through time and space in a sense, you know, something that's just more transcendent than you, even if it's just, I mean, even without the aspect of you believing that the book is true, just the fact that it's old. No,
yeah.
you're reading something that's 2,000 years old or 1,400 years old, you know, and you're able to identify with and connect with the things that it's talking about from way, way, way back, you know. There's something special about that also, you know,
I agree, yeah.
because it
Well,
shows
this
you that the human condition is in a sense unchanging.
mhm.
Great.
You
Yeah,
know,
there's no like God made everything, and there's just no getting
yeah,
around it.
exactly. There's no getting away from it. Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
And so now the things that like uh, we read about like in scripture, it speaks to us, you know,
Yeah.
as it spoke to people 1,000 years ago,
Yeah.
500 years ago. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter how technologically advanced we are or anything, we still have the same. There's still greed, there's still miserliness, you know, there's
Last.
still lust. Yeah, there's still all these things. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, yeah. Yeah.
Man.
So I
Well,
think with
this
the translation, back to the
yeah.
translation issue, I think the translations gets the gist of like these texts. It'll get it right because it's hard to not get it right because like the gist of like these messages are so like in your face that it will be hard not to get it right when you're translating it. You know,
Mm, mm.
but the particulars, I don't think you should take it from a translation. That's my honest opinion.
The
You know?
particulars?
Yeah, particulars like when the Bible is talking about laws, for example.
Mm,
I think if you want to dabble in the laws of the Bible, you need to learn Hebrew. You need to learn Greek.
mm,
You
mm,
know?
mm.
Because now it's delicate. You know what I mean? This is not just like saying, have faith. You know, God is with you. You know, this is like, do you stone the adulterer or not? You know what I mean? This is like a big deal. Yeah, you know, this is like people can die, yeah, in this
Yeah,
issue.
yeah.
So you gotta like know your. This is now something. Oh, you gotta.
It gets
You
very
gotta
real
really.
when if a government takes this and they're like, okay, we're following these laws, and then yeah, it gets very because you're dealing with masses of people.
Yes, exactly. So then you would need people who specialize in the language and who understand the culture in which it was revealed. You know, and how it might apply now in modern society, you know,
Hmm.
and things like that. So that becomes now more technical, and I think that for if your outlook is like you want to be like a person that follows the Bible to the letter, then you need to study the language. Yeah. I think there's no way. I think that it's kind of a mandate on you, to be honest. I don't
But
think.
that would mean you have to study like four different languages or something, right? Or three.
Well, you could start with Hebrew and Greek.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and I think if you study Hebrew, then Arabic and Aramaic isn't very far away. Also.
Well, the only issue with like the Old Testament is understanding that a lot of those laws, according to Christians, aren't applicable anymore.
Mhm.
So when Jesus came, like he changed the dimension according to us. Like so, if you're reading them for the first time, uh, and you're saying, "Hey, as a Christian, I can't eat pork," which you guys still believe you can't eat pork, because that's correct, right?
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, Jesus came and like changed that dimension.
Mhm.
Or like if you said, catch your neighbor working on the Sabbath, you should stone them to death. You know what I mean? Yeah, like Jesus, those are all like Mosaic laws. So you have to understand like the law of Moses, they're not applicable anymore. Those laws were put in place during those times for a reason.
Mhm.
But when Jesus came, like the laws, not that
Well,
they were abolished, not that they were abolished.
yeah.
How do I put it? Like the punishment for them, I guess, was different.
Okay.
You see,
Okay.
Matthew, the thing is where I would actually disagree is that I don't think that Jesus abolished the law, because I think it says in the Bible, in fact, that he didn't come to abolish the law. Um, but I think what he did was he made amendments to it. You know,
No,
the
no,
difference,
no.
the difference
I,
between abolishing the law, like and saying that certain things that may have applied then doesn't apply now. You know what I mean?
no, no, no. So 100% Mosaic law does not apply now according to Christians.
Mhm.
Um, like the laws of God are always consistent and forever. Like the commandments God gave directly, like those were never changed.
Mhm.
Like in God, I don't know how many commandments He gave. I think I've heard something before. Like there's over like 600 different commandments that God gave. You know,
Mhm.
those laws are like consistent, but like the laws of Moses were like consequences for not obeying the law of God, I guess. You know,
Mhm.
so in those times, people didn't. I guess that the logic is in those times there wasn't a savior, and
Mhm.
uh, for every sin, like there had to be like a blood atonement. So there had to be a sacrifice for a lamb or an unblemished lamb, and things, something like that. And there wouldn't be enough lambs for all the sins in the world. So like if you got caught doing something, like the punishment was just death. Like hey, these kill these guys.
Mhm.
So those laws, the laws of Moses, according to us, yeah, those aren't applicable anymore. Like eye for an eye is no longer applicable.
So
Uh,
here's some scripture and that kind of maybe backs what you're saying, Matt. In Hebrews 8, 13, it says, by calling this covenant new, he has made the first one obsolete, and what is obsolete and outdated will soon disappear. So um this verse, and this is what ChatGPT is saying. So, this verse refers to the new covenant established by Jesus, which replaces the old covenant under Mosaic law. The author of Hebrews argues that the new covenant supersedes the old one, rendering aspects of the Mosaic law obsolete, particularly the sacrificial system.
Yes, but the key word there is aspects of the Mosaic law. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, yeah. Because I would say God's
I
law
mean,
is eternal.
that's actually reaffirmed in the Quran itself, the same concept, because the Quran says that Jesus came to make permissible for the people what was previously forbidden to them.
Mm.
The Quran does say that also, confirms that idea, you know? Um, And then the Prophet Muhammad, in turn, he continues to do that. You know, he also makes the Quran makes amendments to the law.
Yeah,
The law of
that's
Torah, that is. You know?
yeah, that's definitely where Christianity differs.
You know?
Yeah, so like
The Quran also affirms a lot of the laws of the Torah.
yeah, that's
Also
pretty cool
affirms
too, though. That's actually really cool because how is it like you agree on so much, but like the two factions clash so bad? Like, you know what I mean?
Semantics.
Hmm. So you mean the Jews and the Muslims agree on a
Yeah.
lot.
Yes.
In fact, the Muslims are very good Jews in a sense, like in terms of their practice and lifestyle. Often they are a lot more in accordance with Judaism than the Jews themselves. You know, because they take things more seriously, like the laws of the religion. You know, which incidentally coincide with the laws of the Torah in many aspects. You know. But historically, the Muslims and Jews didn't actually, for the most part, they didn't actually have a problem with each other. You know, it's only recent years, you know, past 70 odd years, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and these are obviously because of the Middle Eastern situation. But in previous years, I mean, throughout Muslim dominance of the world, which was 1,300 years, there were always Jews living in under the caliphate, under the Muslim authority, and it was never an issue, you know? Yeah. So, yeah, so this is more recent than historical. Although they try to portray it as historical, but actually, you know, if you look through history, there's very few incidences where Jews and Muslims have a problem with each other. You know? I mean, actually, you could argue the other opposite point, because Muslims and Christians went to war quite often. You know?
Yep.
Because they were competing for empires, you know, but whereas Jews didn't have an empire, they were living under the Islamic empire. You understand? So the Christians and Muslims had political struggles for empire against each other, you know. The Jews never did, because they never had political power, you know.
So, are we all Muslim guys because we're all trying to obey God?
I think in a general sense, not obviously not from a a sense of like the Quran, right? But yeah, I think in a general, I would say in a general sense from everything that you said. And I know you probably like 100% disagree with me. You're like, no, no. He's screaming in his head right now. No, no.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, back to the point of translation. So I mean, I think that there are many examples. If I mean, we can go into some examples, you know, where translations are very problematic, you know,
Mm.
they
Do you
sort
want
of.
to do you want to go into some examples? It's almost been 2 hours, so
I think we should go in just one or two examples to wrap it up, you know, because we
yeah,
didn't
let's
like
do
show
that.
anything concrete, you know.
Yeah.
And I sent you something, but let me see if I can open it here. I'll just share one example from there. Okay, here we go. Okay, so I'll give an example because this also relates to Judaism and Christianity, right? And we'll see, like in the early scripture in Leviticus 20:10, it says, if a man commits adultery with another man's wife, the wife say of his neighbor, both the man and the woman, the adulterer and adulteress, must be put to death. Right? Then we have like the New Testament, Corinthians, it says, but because of fornications, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband. Okay? Now, when you get to the Arabic scripture, the Quran, right? There's a word that Muslims have to describe both these acts, fornication and adultery. The word is zina. Okay? Now the Quran says, in the verse in question, it says that, let me go to the verse. If we go to chapter 24, verse 3 in the Quran, I put three translations. The first translation says, the fornicator, wait, let me go to the beginning of the story. Okay. It says, the fornicator does not marry except a female fornicator or a polytheist, and none marries her except a fornicator or a polytheist, and that marriage to such persons has been made unlawful for the believers. That's the one translation. The other translation says, Yusuf Ali, let no man guilty of adultery or fornication marry and but a woman similarly guilty or an unbeliever. Okay? In the next translation, Mohummud Yaaseen, the older translation, says, the adulterer shall not marry save an adulteress or an idolatress. So you can see from these three translations, the one translator decides that the Arabic word zina refers to fornication. The second translator decides that it refers to adultery and fornication. And then the third translator decides that it only applies to adultery. You see that, right? So, of course, if that is the case, it will yield very different results. Especially since the follow-up verse tells you that such people should receive 100 lashes. Now, because there's a concrete punishment attached to this act, right, it would be important to know, is it referring to fornication? Is it referring to fornication and adultery, or just adultery? But the three translations all suggest something different. This is an example, okay? I'm not gonna go like too far into it, but that's an example of how you could become confused with translation.
Yeah, no, that
Because
that makes a lot of sense. And its implications too, because if
and
someone,
implications for daya, yes.
yeah,
Yeah,
if someone's just like fornicating and they get an adulterer consequence, that's rough. That's a rough time.
yeah, that's very rough, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and so and the reason why these translators have this kind of a question or this discrepancy is because Islamic law, having sort of taken from the Mosaic law originally, right, ascribed the punishment of stoning to death to the adulterer.
Is that
So
still
the
evident?
person, so the translator who believes in the stoning to death, he will opt for this translation to relate to fornication and not adultery. Get it? Because he would want the adulterer to be stoned to death. So then he will translate this to mean fornication. So according to him, the fornicator would get 100 lashes and the adulterer would be stoned to death as per the Torah.
Mm.
Understand?
So people can kind of willy-nilly just
So they
make
will
up,
maneuver it that way. Whereas
yeah.
the other guy who translates it adultery and fornication, right? He goes with the Islamic law view that the person who commits fornication and adultery or adultery, both of them should get 100 lashes. But the person who committed adultery on top of the 100 lashes should be stoned to death. So that must be his view, so that's why he translated it that way. The third person who translated that it only refers to adultery believes that since the Quran doesn't mention stoning to death at all, that punishment was superseded, was amended by the Quran,
Mm.
right? And that it really only refers to adultery, and the adulterer must get 100 lashes. You get what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
those are three major discrepancies just by one word,
Amazing.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the thing is, this is not only a discrepancy in English because of the translation, this would even be a debate in Arabic. You get what I'm saying? And that's because there's already a traditional approach, background doctrine, law that was already established prior to the interpretation of these verses.
Mm.
And
I
the reason
noticed.
why there's that is because the Muslims in general, in the beginning, you remember the Quran was revealed over 23 years. So the Muslims in general had an acceptance of the Mosaic law to begin with. See, so it becomes a bit, so that's kind of the thorny area, like of the legal tradition.
Mm. Wait,
Yeah.
what do Muslims say about Jesus updating Mosaic law?
That's in the Quran. It's proven
Oh, okay.
by them. But the thing is, Muslims sometimes disagree on what the update was, like when it comes to us.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So some of them, most of them, embrace stoning as the punishment for adultery, as per the previous law, right? And then a minority of them say that no, the Quran is the update. So because the Quran already has a punishment for adultery, the 100 lashes, so therefore the stoning no longer applies.
Mm. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, so there's that kind of thing, and so there is sort of that challenge, let's put it that way, in
Mm.
interpretation, and this interpretation spans beyond just language or translation. The translator, the one who translates it into English, it's because he already comes from a background of knowing what the law is, so he's going to interpret the Quran in light of the law instead of taking the law from the Quran. Let's put it that way. Yeah. You get what I'm saying?
That kind of confused me. But yeah, I get what you're saying overall though.
It's because you know something already. It's like the second coming of Jesus. You know about it. So now when you read the Quran, you can see the second coming of Jesus in the Quran. Although if you didn't know about the second coming, you wouldn't think that it says that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We already know that they're stoning for adultery, so we're going to interpret the Quran in such a way that they can still be stoning for adultery. Get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Because
Yeah.
because they already accepted it as a fact.
Right.
Matthew, your mic is on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. So the question I have, so like once again, like the stories of Jesus, where, like in the Quran, where do these stories originate from? So I guess my question would be, how could you have stories about Jesus without having the second coming of Jesus?
Well, obviously we believe the Quran was revealed by God to the Prophet Muhammad, right? Um, and naturally, the Quran is not about any one particular prophet. It's about the message, and then as demonstrated through all these various prophets the Quran talks about. So
I
I
follow
feel
that.
that my personal opinion regarding the Quran is that the second coming is just not important enough to talk about. Because the Quran is a very small book compared to other scriptures. You know?
Mm. Hmm.
So it talks about things that just are relevant to your life and to now, basically. You know? And so a lot of the kind of the prophecies and the future and that type of thing, a lot of it is just left out. There are lots of prophecies in Islam, but it's not in the Quran. It's related to the hadith, to like sayings of the Prophet that people have tried to record. You know? Like his prophecies he made, but those are not in the Quran. Those are not part of the revelation of God. Those are just from the eye of prophecy because he's a prophet. So, you know, he must have that deep and meaningful wisdom to be able to make some sort of predictions, you know?
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, so the second coming is not specifically mentioned in the Quran, but it is interpreted or inferred. You know? Based on a common tradition that Muslims in general, I think 99% of all Muslims believe in the second coming of Jesus. It's something they taught since a kid. You are taught it. You don't know where it's from. It's part of the doctrine. You know what I'm
Uh,
saying?
And so Muslims don't think that the Prophet Muhammad is the second coming of Jesus. Is that a thing or no? They don't think that?
No, they don't believe that. No, they believe actually in the second coming of Jesus.
Gotcha.
Same as the
Oh,
Christians.
oh wow. Oh wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
It's one of the first things I learned from him.
Huh.
They believe that Jesus has to come back as the second coming, and that Jesus is going to affirm to the Christians that he's not God. That's their spin on it. That's one of their main reasons for why Jesus is the second coming is going to happen. That's what they say.
You know,
For
with
me
the,
personally, to be honest with you, I tend to be very suspicious of religion, even my own tradition. So for me, if there's no evidence for it, I'm neither here nor there, you know? I'm like, look, if you want to believe it, but I don't feel obligated to believe anything without conclusive, evidence, yeah. I don't deny the second coming, but I also don't acknowledge it. I just don't feel that it's relevant to who I am and what I do
Mm.
right now. Know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I'm not into the whole eschatology thing, the future, the end of the world, the coming of whoever, and the Mahdi and Jesus coming back and all. A lot of people are kind of into that. I just am not into that,
Mm.
you know?
Mm.
Because I feel like I have spiritual problems and real world problems and life problems that I need to be focused on, you know? Um, and that there's a lot that religion has to offer now. I feel like we need to be focused on that instead of something that may happen in the future. You know what I mean? That's just I have a pragmatic approach to
yeah,
religion. I don't
yeah.
know. What do you think about that, Matthew?
No, I agree with your approach to it. Obviously, we can't. Even as Christians, we don't know the date or time of the second coming. Like, there's nothing that is definitive, and everybody has this theory because scripture suggests this or suggests this, and it seems like everybody throughout all of history has been wrong. So I think Jesus even warns you, like, don't even think about the second coming. Like live now. Just be righteous. And
What's that line? He says he's gonna come like a thief in the night or something. Is that what it was?
well, he says it'll be like the times of Noah, which we could have a whole different debate about or discussion about that. But like the times of Noah, and no one knows the date or time essentially. Like there's no stop stop focusing on like you're saying, and let's like focus on real problems we have now and try to capture souls so that when he does come back, that people are prepared.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're not a righteous person and Jesus comes back, you're not going to recognize him anyway.
Facts.
But if you focused on being a good person, a righteous person, sincere towards God, and Jesus comes, you will recognize it. You know?
The
I
one,
mean,
the
at
one, the
that
one thing.
moment, you will believe in the second coming.
Well, the
You
one thing.
understand what happens. Yeah, so, yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that stuck out is how you guys described that the second coming, like Jesus will come back and tell the Christians like he's not actually God. Like we believe he'll actually come back and every knee will bow and every tongue will confess Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior.
Well, it's the opposite,
So
yeah.
it's crazy. It's just crazy how like different we are.
Yeah.
Like the things that like we disagree on are like this is the line. Like you're either on this side or that side. But like everything, like the 93% in the middle, it's like, oh yeah, I agree with that. So yeah.
Yeah, in fact, well, the version of the second coming you have, we call that the Antichrist.
Well,
We
there's
say the Antichrist will come back. Antichrist will come back as a false Messiah. So the Antichrist will come as a false Messiah and say that he's God, and that everyone will kneel to him. But the Prophet
wow.
Muhammad said, know that your God is not a man.
Crazy.
Mm.
Yeah, crazy. Crazy.
Well, this
Yeah,
has
so
been a
so that's like the total opposite, right?
yeah,
Yes. Yes.
man.
Crazy.
Well, it's been super enlightening. It's I feel like we learned a lot, about the caveats of the differences between Islam and Christianity, and also the similarities too. So it's very, very fun to engage like that. So, should we close it out with a little prayer, or does anyone want to
Go
do
for
it,
it.
or do you want me to read from
You
my
go.
little book?
You've been doing good.
All right, good book. O thou compassionate Lord, thou who art generous and able, we are servants of thine, sheltered beneath thy providence. Cast thy glance of favor upon us. Give us light to our eyes, hearing to our ears, and understanding and love to our hearts. Render our souls joyous and happy through thy glad tidings. O Lord, point out to us the pathway of thy kingdom, and resuscitate all of us through the breaths of the Holy Spirit. Bestow upon us life everlasting, and confer upon us never-ending honor. Unify mankind, and illumine the world of humanity. May we all follow thy pathway, long for thy good pleasure, and seek the mysteries of thy kingdom. O God, unite us and connect our hearts with thy indissoluble bond. Verily, thou art the giver, thou art the kind one, and thou art the Almighty. Dubaha.
Okay, thank you guys for a great discussion.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I learned a lot. It was real. And until next
Hopefully
time,
we can do
inshallah.
this again next week, man.
Until next week. Peace, guys.
Inshallah. Yes.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.